Bibliophiles of the internet, today I'm back to share some more If You Like This, Read That recommendations, backlist edition. So basically what I'm going to be doing is recommending backlist books based off of popular frontlist books that you may have heard about. For anyone unfamiliar with publishing terms, frontlist refers to the newest, most recent releases, upcoming releases, the ones everyone's talking about that are often backed by the most marketing resources. Backlist, on the other hand, refers to books that have been out for a while, books that are older, that may or may not have fallen out of the public consciousness. It's important to understand that things move very fast in publishing, so backlist could really refer to any books from a year ago, 2 years ago, to anything that came out 10, 20, 30 years ago and beyond. In fact, publishing moves so fast that almost as soon as I publish this video, it will no longer be relevant. So enjoy! Anyways, now that we have our working definitions, let's just get right into it with my first pairing, which I actually alluded to in my recent May wrap-up. So I will once again say that if you like The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd, you should read Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. This is a super unique book that came out in 2012. It's a blend of contemporary adult fiction, mystery, a bit of surrealism or magic, and there's even a bit of an adventure aspect. The story follows Clay Janin, who I believe used to work in tech, and he ends up working in this hole-in-the-wall indie bookstore, and the more he works there, the more he realizes that this store and its clientele are extremely curious. A lot of regulars come in without buying anything, and they're sort of leafing through these very obscure volumes in the furthest reaches of the store, so Clay comes to the conclusion that this store must be some kind of elaborate front. He starts keeping track of these customers and the books they're looking at and realizes it's part of this bigger code or puzzle that could potentially unlock the secret to eternal life. I look back on this book with so much fondness. It was easily one of my favorite books when I first read it back in 2013. Very much like The Cartographers, this story is somehow able to juxtapose the complexities of analog materials with technology in really fascinating ways. Both stories are super easy to get into as well because they drop you right into these really compelling mysteries that don't have any immediate or obvious answers. The setups are both so curious and bizarre that it makes you want to read on and find out what happens next. And they both also have this surprising element of magic or fantasy that twists your brain just a little bit and makes the story that much more memorable. So I think there's actually a lot these books have in common. Next, I'm going to say if you're interested in The Charmed List by Julie Abe, then you should read the Magic in Manhattan series, which starts with Bras and Broomsticks by Sarah Milanowski. This is a YA series that came out in 2005. It's definitely more on the zany, funny, satirical side of things, and it's about a girl named Rachel who just discovered that she comes from a family of witches. But she's not the one with newly discovered magical powers. Her younger sister is. So Rachel's definitely bummed about the magical genes having skipped over her, and she's trying to convince her younger sister to use her powers to do things like get their dad's wedding canceled, help her win back her best friend, and find a spring fling date. Like I said, this is definitely more on the lighthearted side of things, and I think it pairs well with The Charmed List because both of them seem to be about magical or magical adjacent teenagers who are trying to use magic for shenanigans. The Charmed List is about a witchy protagonist who lives in a world very much like our own, and she's had to spend her entire high school career trying to hide her powers, and now she wants to use them to get back at her former best friend Jack, who's the only person who knows about her magic. I think that's also a dynamic these stories share, that the characters exist in a world that is predominantly non-magical, and as a result, their access to magic is a really big secret. But they both want to have it both ways and use their magic to affect non-magical people despite that. I haven't read The Charmed List yet, but I definitely think there's some strong parallels between these. If you're excited for A Strange and Stubborn Endurance by Foz Meadows, or perhaps you enjoyed A Marvelous Light by Freya Marski, then you should read Swords Point by Ellen Kushner. This is a classic queer fantasy of manners that was first published in the late 1980s. It's about Richard St. Fear, who's the most prolific sword for hire in the entire city, but one day the death at the end of his sword actually ends up inspiring outrage. Between one moment and the next, he goes from being a venerated hero to a villain, and he's trying to navigate the following social and political consequences and everything that comes next. I actually read this book back in 2015 for a class on fantasy writing, which I took with Nalo Hopkinson, and I still think about it all the freaking time. I still have not read the third and final book in this series because I'm a coward, but I really do need to fix that. I put these titles together because they're sort of occupying that queer historical fantasy space, playing with those fantasy of manners tropes, social hierarchies, dealing heavily with concepts of social propriety, and all those sorts of things. I really do love this series. It has that classic sort of writing style that you just don't get to see anymore, but at the same time it's super accessible and has these really likable, delightful characters who are just trying to make their own way in the world and walk their own paths regardless of what society thinks. If you're someone who was hyped about Dark Stars edited by John F.D. Taft, then you should look into Crota by Owl Going Back. I heard about this one from Bear. It's a horror story that was originally published in 1996. It's written by an indigenous author, and it's about this ancient evil known as the Crota, which has unleashed itself on this small town in Missouri as the local authorities try to make sense of this spike in gruesome murders and disappearances. As everyone else sort of fumbles the investigation, there's a character named Little Hawk who belongs to the Lakota people of the Great Sioux Nation, who immediately recognizes the mark of the Crota and goes to get the help of his people to finally take it down for good. I'm comparing this one to Dark Stars because it's a creature feature, and I feel like a horror anthology has to have some kind of creature feature or monster somewhere at some point within it. Admittedly, I'm kind of taking a shot in the dark here because I don't have a ton of horror references, but this anthology features authors like Caroline Kepnes, Josh Mellerman, Stephen Graham Jones, Priya Sharma, and so many other voices, and I feel like Owl Going Back definitely fits into that tradition. I listened to this book in 2 days because I could not walk away from it. I could not put it down. It just barrels ahead at a brutal, breakneck, ruthless pace. Again, it does have that sort of classic feel to it. You don't get to see creature features quite like this so much anymore, and it's that sinister sense of uncertainty that really drives the story home. But it also has great messages about reframing who we believe to have the capacity for heroism, especially in life or death situations, because this story fundamentally and purposefully takes away all power and authority from characters who are white. Like I said, it is older, so it is antiquated in some ways, but if you enjoy horror stories, especially classic horror stories, then you should definitely read this. Next, I'd like to say, if you've been excited for When You Call My Name by Tucker Shaw, then you should definitely read Where We Go From Here by Lucas Rocha. This was originally written in Portuguese, published in 2018. It is a queer Latina contemporary story set in Brazil that follows 3 characters who become connected because of their relationship to HIV. Ian has just been diagnosed with HIV, Victor, who I believe was dating him, has just tested negative, and Enrique has been living with HIV for several years at this point. They're all brought together by a fateful trip to an HIV clinic, so it's about how all 3 of them process these diagnoses and learn how to unpack their baggage with this extremely stigmatized disease. When You Call My Name is a recent release set in New York during the 90s at the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and it's about 2 queer boys who meet each other and fall in love, and one of them is eventually diagnosed with HIV. To me, the comparisons between these two really draw themselves. Where We Go From Here especially is such a beautiful and thoughtful story, and its purpose is very clearly to destigmatize HIV and bring our understanding of the disease out from the past and into the present. A lot of people still think about HIV as something that affected the queer community in the United States decades ago, but we're still living with it as a global community and dealing with the effects of that loss. Even now, there's a prevalent misconception that HIV is the gay disease, and that anyone diagnosed with HIV is automatically resigned to a death sentence. I think both these stories are trying to show queer people loving each other and taking care of each other through HIV and through that fear, uncertainty, or messiness. Where We Go From Here is doing that through a distinctly Latina perspective, so even though there is a lot of overlap between these stories, I think that is a key difference. Next, if you're anticipating Young Bloods by Sasha Lawrence, I would like to recommend another YA vampire book to you, and that would be The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black. This came out in 2013. I know Holly Black is known for her fairy stories and high fantasy stories, but this one goes extremely hard, if I may say so myself. It's a paranormal YA story following Tara, who lives in a version of the world where legions of vampires are quarantined in zones known as cold towns. One morning, Tara wakes up after a party and realizes that everyone is dead because her ex-boyfriend has been turned into a vampire and killed everyone in sight. Now she finds herself alone with him as he struggles to hold on to the very last scraps of his personhood, and also a mysterious boy who seems to be hiding a terrible secret. Not knowing whether she's been turned herself, Tara finds herself in a race against the clock and does the only thing she can think to do, which is drive them all to the nearest cold town, praying that she's not too late. I've actually read this one a few times, and honestly, I think it holds up. It's a super dark, compelling look into a dystopic vampiric future that interrogates a lot of these conceptions we have about vampires, and I think Tara as a protagonist is just the best kind of ruthless. It's really about embracing the monster within instead of trying to escape it, and there's something really powerful about the way Holly Black executes that concept. I put these 2 books together because they're both YA vampire stories, but I also think there's an interesting parallel with how both stories explore an explicit connection between vampirism and disease. In Youngblood, it's more so about how human blood carries a disease that endangers vampires, whereas in The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, vampirism itself is treated as a disease. Both stories also seem to have a compelling interplay between vampire characters and human characters, exploring how they walk that line as temporary allies when really each of them poses a significant threat in different ways. There's definitely differences because Youngblood takes place in a school setting. It seems to be playing more with dark academia elements. It's more contemporary, whereas The Coldest Girl in Cold Town is more dystopic, but both stories have an element of mystery and tension that I think connects them as well. well. I'm also gonna slip in a quick 2-for-1 recommendation and say that if you're looking for badass vampire books in 2022 and you still haven't read The Immortal Rules by Julie Kagawa, then I regret to inform you that somewhere along the way in your life you made all the wrong choices. Japanese-American vampire desperately trying to survive and find a cure for her vampirism by hiding among humans in a barren, ruthless, dystopic future. Do I need to say anything else? This last one is a bit of a stretch, I'll admit it, but I just really want to recommend this book, so I'm gonna say if you're chomping at the bit for the quote-unquote MILF book Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner, might I interest you in Coffee Boy by S.A. Chance. Coffee Boy is a queer indie adult romance first published in 2016, and it's about Kieran, a young trans man who's recently graduated from college, and his first job out of school is this internship for a political campaign. The pressures of being an openly out trans man in the workplace definitely makes things a little bit less exciting, but Kieran also entertains himself by secretly nursing some very inappropriate thoughts about his painfully straight boss. Listen, I haven't read Mistakes Were Made yet, so I don't know how closely these compare in terms of content, but there's definitely some overlap, especially since both stories explore romantic dynamics between characters with a bit of an age gap. Obviously, everyone in these stories are consenting adults, but the entire hook of Mistakes Were Made is about a character who unknowingly sleeps with one of her best friend's moms. And while there's not a huge age gap between Kieran and Seth, Seth is definitely a bit older and more experienced, especially compared to a recent college graduate. Both books also focus on the characters trying to keep these relationships on the down low, either for professional reasons or social reasons, while also engaging with some pretty steamy stuff in private. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but S.A. Chant is so good about celebrating trans love and trans joy and showing trans characters receiving exactly the kind of love they deserve, and Coffee Boy is definitely the blueprint in that respect. So those are just a handful of backlist recommendations. If you'd like to see me do more, definitely let me know, and in the comments down below, feel free to drop a backlist book that you would recommend yourself. But that's everything I had to share with you for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.